Week one of the college football season. We had some very good games. We had some teams get exposed. And we had some players show up who we didn't even know about. But today I want to talk to you about a few games and why a few of these teams have to look to get better, or they're going to have to start looking at the games coming up this season to see if they're even going to be playoff worthy. Ohio State and Texas played in probably the biggest game of week one. Texas came out and played well defensively. Ohio State played pretty well defensively too. I think part of the problem that Texas faced is that they're going to have to figure out how to get this offense going. A lot of belief was in Arch Manning. A lot of belief was that this receiving corps was going to come out and play well. We all knew that the defense was going to be good for both sides. Texas defense was projected to be probably the top defense in the country. Even though Ohio State had a better defense last year, Ohio State lost a lot of players to the league, and that hurt them. But as you saw Saturday, that team still played extremely well under Matt Patricia, who was giving different looks to Arch Manning, and Arch Manning had no answer to it. The Texas offense had no answer to it. The receivers couldn't really get open. The throws were late. A lot of these things that Texas was doing was not self-inflicted, but kind of self-inflicted. They had no rhythm, no timing, couldn't really run the ball. And Ohio State pushed the envelope on them, pushed the issue, and caused a lot of confusion for this team. I think moving forward, you have to ask yourself about this Arch Manning situation. The media has put a lot of attention on him, and for right reasons. But Arch hasn't proved himself yet. Arch just came in a few games and played behind Quinn Ewers, but he hasn't played enough to where you can say he's the guy who everyone thinks he is. Teams are going to now have film on him. Teams are now going to know what to do to stop him. They're also going to know that he's late with throwing his balls. He started to look better in the fourth quarter. The confidence was there. He started to pick up on reads. He was able to make different checks and all of this stuff. But looking at the whole framework of what he did Saturday, there has to be better production from him. Thinking of him being the lead horse, thinking of him being who everybody put him out to be. It's not time to give up on the kid yet. It's one game against the best team in the country, against the reigning champions. You knew they were going to have a game plan for him. And then having an NFL defensive coordinator, it just all didn't play in his favor. Ohio State is a team that no matter who they lose, they're going to stack up on players. They're going to get the best that they can get in 4 and 5 stars at almost all of their positions. So for Texas, you go look back at the tape, you take it to the drawing board, and you have to understand where you can get better slowly and figure out how you can help Arch Manning and where his strengths are. Because everyone is wanting him to come out and just light it up. It's hard to do that. And you have to play these SEC opponents who are going to have just as good a defense as Ohio State. Probably not as dominant, but they're going to be just as good. And so I'm looking forward to seeing Arch Manning start to take trends toward the right direction and play with a bit more confidence. I'm not going to give up on him just yet. It's one game, and I'm not going to overreact to him playing the best team in the country. That's not going to happen. He's gonna get better. He's going to make the reads and the checks that he needs to. He hasn't seen this level of competition yet. He came in during the Georgia game, but that was in the middle of the game. Nobody was truly ready for him, and he really just ran around. I want to see him start to make rhythm passes. I want to see him start to take control of this team and get a certain receiver involved who can be his number one receiver. Find a target who, no matter what is going on, you're going to get the ball to. He has these small things that he has to work on, but I think Arch can be good down the line. FSU and Bama. Alabama came out and laid an egg. FSU looked really good to start. Bama actually came out and scored the first drive of the game, which was really good for them. They ran the ball, they threw the ball well, got the ball to Ryan Williams. One thing that I was looking at throughout the game, and one thing that I was still concerned with watching Alabama was last year when Jalen Milroe got benched, the player that came in for Jalen Milroe was Ty Simpson. Alabama almost lost to USF. Saturday did not prove that Simpson is ready to start for a team like Alabama, to start against this caliber of competition. The moment looked too big for him. He really didn't make a lot of plays that wowed you. And as I looked at this game, Alabama got dominated up front on both sides of the ball, on the defensive line and the offensive line. So you have to ask yourself, being Kalen DeVore, where can we improve at? And in a short amount of time, and we're about to get ready to play in the SEC, where teams could be better than Florida State was. We don't know how good Florida State is going to be throughout the season. They put on a show, but you gotta get ready for teams that are going to be in your conference that you know are going to play up just to the level of what Florida State did. Florida State was able to get sacks with 4-man pressures. Florida State was able to cover your receivers and take your best option away. They made your defense look like pedestrians. So you have to figure out, where can you improve to get this team back on its feet? Because if you don't, they can go down the route of quitting. And this is not what Alabama fans have come to see. They want to see a team who is going to play, who is going to compete, who is going to dominate. And Alabama, for a long time, or ever, have we seen them get dominated in the trenches like that on both sides of the ball. They couldn't stop the run, and they couldn't really affect anything Florida State was doing offensively. Defensively, Alabama looked confused. The motion was killing them. The quarterback run was hurting them, as it always does. So I'm looking for Alabama to get back on their feet and make slow, steady progress. But I think Kalen DeVore, he's on the hot seat. Kalen DeVore has to figure out what he's going to do to make this team back relevant. Nobody fears Alabama anymore. So going into these games, thinking that you're just going to walk in the first half at least, you can scare a team with the logo on your shirt. That is not happening anymore. Kalen DeVore has to figure out a way that this team is going to dominate without just a name brand. Because as Nick Saban was on the way out the door, it was starting to diminish too at that time. So you have to figure out how you can get Alabama back to being Alabama and playing Alabama football with the authority and with the tenacity on defense. People trouting and jogging to the ball, that was hard to see from an Alabama team. Alabama doesn't play that way. Alabama filled the league up with ballers. And right now, it doesn't look like that is going to happen with this team. You have to give effort if you're going to play on that field with that logo on your shirt, with that name brand tied to you. But they just didn't. Florida State came out. Florida State dominated every phase of the game. Florida State looked like they wanted to be there. And the most dangerous thing about Florida State was Florida State came in with nothing to lose. There was no chip on the shoulder for the program. There was really no expectations. Last year, Florida State won 2 games. You need to win 2 games to be just as good and 3 games to be better. That's not hard to do. Florida State didn't come in and the media didn't think that Florida State even really had a chance to compete with Alabama. One of my biggest things was, even with the USF game, with them playing Boise, is a team who has nothing to lose. And then you get transfers who wasn't here during this whole process of just this one season, because the year before, Florida State was 13-0, won the ACC, and should have been in the playoffs. But that's neither here nor there. When you get these transfers to come in, like Tommy, and play, and they didn't experience what went on last year, they could still flip the program around because they're not used to the losing culture. So all of the losing culture is out of here, and you get a quarterback who's ready to win, who's older, who came from an already program who was doing okay. Florida State didn't come out with a chip on their shoulder. Florida State came out with something to prove. And the thing for me was, Florida State came out, and they were not scared to make mistakes. They were not scared to give up a touchdown. And there was moments where the old Florida State team, if they were in some of those predicaments, like the 3rd and 17 or 15, they may have given up a first down. When when the punter punted the ball and the returner hit his shin on the ball trying to get out the way, that could have been the end of the game for an old Florida State team last year. But this year, they showed poise, they showed moxie, they stood up to the test, and the defense looked elite. They got up on Alabama and showed Alabama why this team is going to be a household name this season. They played tough, they played with grit, and they played sound football. And all you could ask for from that team was to do that. The secondary played amazing, taking away their best option in Ryan Williams. Ryan Williams was almost not even there. The game that he had this weekend and Jeremiah Smith, you look at those two and you're just asking what happened. But at the same time, playing with two new quarterbacks, that's going to happen in those programs. So for the defense to take away Ryan Williams like that and just to line up and say, we ain't going to let you be more physical than us. That's not going to happen. You're going to have to beat us with some kind of other way. You're going to have to beat us with some kind of other thing. But the physicality is not going to be the thing that you beat us with. And I am glad that Florida State stood up that way and showed them that. But now Alabama has some things they have to answer. Because if not, this fan base is not going to let this go on for long. You only probably got 2 losses you could take this season if you're Kalen DeVore. 2. 3 is pushing it. Outside of that, it's going to get ugly for what Kalen DeVore has, and if they're even going to try to buy him out. He has to be ready for this, and he has to get his team ready. LSU and Clemson, LSU was extremely dominant. Coming into the game, Clemson's defense was the talk. Clemson returning a lot of starters and returning the most players in the country was the talk. Clemson was supposed to be the team from the ACC that was going to be extremely dominant and that was going to show up and show out. And Clemson came into this game and got pushed around by LSU. Clemson defense still played pretty well, only holding LSU to 17 points. And I think LSU's offense kind of stalled out and played okay. I think they're going to get better as the season goes on. Nessemeyer is going to be better as the season goes on. Just have to get some camaraderie going. Clemson's offense has to find something that's going to spark. There was a lot of talk about Cade Klubnik. He didn't play well. Where do you go from here now, knowing that in the past when Clemson was really good, even though their defense was always good, they had electrifying offenses. Their offenses were always good and always big time. I'm curious to see what Dabo does here, not having the firepower that he's used to. Even getting rid of your best running back last year, I'm wondering, where does the Clemson offense go from here? Because you can't lay an egg like that and then think you're going to be the best team in the conference when Miami showed up against very good competition this Sunday, and then you have Florida State show up against very good competition on Saturday. I'm asking myself, where can Clemson be and what can they do to get better in these situations? Because LSU's defense looked amazing. They looked like probably one of the top defenses in the country against a prolific offense that was supposed to be. See, I go back to the OSU game, and both defenses were good, but the difference between LSU and Clemson game and Ohio State and Texas game was Ohio State and Texas are 2 new quarterbacks. So you would think that those 2 types of defenses would confuse them and play extremely good defense on them. So that to me wasn't a big deal. Clemson's quarterback, being an older quarterback who has the experience, who has played, who has been the starter, who had a good season last year, and everyone was thinking that he's going to step up to the plate. Nessemeyer, LSU's quarterback, had a good season last year. And both of these guys could have been drafted. But when you look at the entire play of the game, both defenses played extremely well. But Clemson's offense has to be better than this with a returning quarterback. You have to be. This is why their game was later. This is why I think Clemson played at night and Texas and Ohio State didn't. The two quarterbacks weren't on an elite status, so you know that they weren't going to score a lot on both defenses, Texas or Ohio State. With LSU and Clemson, with the style of quarterbacks coming into this game, coming off the offseason, you would think that it could almost be a shootout. But we know that Clemson's defense was elite. LSU's defense has something to prove to us. Well, they did. And they stepped up to the plate and played tough defense, fast defense, and the coverage that they had was elite. The defensive back play was elite. And if they could keep it up, they can be one of the more dangerous teams in the country. And they could be somebody who you look at and have to ask the question of, will this team be beatable? If their quarterback can play up to par and score the points, LSU can be an extremely dangerous team. Extremely dangerous. Tennessee, another SEC team, they played Syracuse, Syracuse is not a big-time program, but they had a great season last year. So the promise for them is high. Tennessee is coming off a tricky offseason. You lose one of the better quarterbacks in the country at the time because of some NIL stuff. Tennessee stepped up to the plate, and their quarterback threw for what was 247 yards and 3 touchdowns. This shows you that the team as a whole is ready to play and ready to step up, and they wasn't just depending on how good Nico would have been this season. They showed us quickly that you could throw that Nico talk out the door. This team is ready to play. And watching them just showed you they're throwing the ball all around the field, running the ball. They were an elite team. And they played against a Syracuse team, like I said, who was pretty good. But we didn't think they were going to compete with Tennessee. Tennessee is going to show us that if they're able to be consistent, they can be one of the more dangerous teams out here this season. And then next I want to talk to you about South Carolina. South Carolina, physical. But I think Sellers, he could be a talking point of this season if he's able to keep his consistency. Nick Harbor was hard to cover. Nick Harbor was also talked about as he's going to be one of the guys where he's just going to run a good 40. He has the body type that NFL scouts wants. And he's just going to be someone where you look at him, we draft him, he could be a project. 99 yards for Nick Harbor. That's what I'm talking about. He showed up, he played, and he showed why he can possibly be one of the most elite receivers in the country with his speed and size. A tight end body with track speed. You have to look at this team and think that they can be contenders. After seeing Saturday, the SEC is wide open for anyone. Georgia looked good. Tennessee looked good. Ole Miss looked good. Florida. Most of the big-time teams, if not all, look pretty good outside of Alabama. They won the games they were supposed to. But South Carolina is not too far off this season. A lot of returning starters. But like I said, when you have that return at the quarterback position, it puts you that much over everyone else. This is one of those things where next I want to talk about is Miami struggle with. I'm not Miami, but Notre Dame struggle with. Having a true freshman start is going to give you some problems. They played well later into the fourth, and they almost were able to come back. But Miami going to get Carson Beck played as a key factor and why this team won and why this team is going to be one of the most dangerous teams in the ACC. Carson Beck is a champion. Carson Beck comes from a program that breeds NFL players. So I'm looking at Carson Beck to lead this team and he's going to lead this team, but he's going to also be given the keys to drive this car. This is no more of a running offense and having receivers who are okay. Georgia rarely has really big time receivers. Miami has the speed and the size at receiver, and Miami doesn't care to throw the ball every down. So Carson Beck is going to be in this predicament where he can show up and be one of the better quarterbacks in the country. And I think him going to Miami is going to extremely help his draft stock. Miami's defense looked like they were back, looked like they were fighting. they played up the par as well. They were not scared of anything that Notre Dame did. And I think they got to a point where they knew that they were the more physical team and they just had to close out the game. I looked at that Miami game and I'm saying, okay, Miami could possibly be back this season. And I think they're a more dominant team than last year. And last year was an extremely well season for them. But when they can play up front and they can stop the run and they can dictate what you're doing on offense, they're a more dangerous team. Last year, they struggled with dictating what the offense did because they couldn't stop anything. Their offense has scored 40, 50 points last year. But the defense couldn't stop anything, and it showed in bigger games. But the games where they were supposed to beat teams, they did it because either way, your offense is going to put up 50 on California and all of this stuff. So for them to be better this season, they have to continue to step up. Miami along with Florida State. If these defenses can put on this type of show that they did already this past weekend, this is going to be the type of season that everyone has waited for the state of Florida's football. Miami's defense came out and played extremely physical, but they also were able to rush the passer. And then to close the game, they were able to rush the passer and make plays. Previously, they weren't able to. So now, as Carson Beck comes here, we just need Carson Beck to be his elite self. We don't need you to go out and win a game. We need you to go out, be poised, make the plays, and win as needed. But your defense is going to be here. Last year, Cam Ward had to win games. If Cam Ward didn't outscore you, this team was losing. Carson Beck doesn't have to do the same because this defense looks different. And they're flying to the ball and they're more physical and they're older. I think Miami could have an opportunity to play for the ACC championship game along with Florida State. I'm interested to see what Clemson will do because Clemson is still a powerhouse and Clemson will get it together. And Clemson is going to be dominant against the ACC teams because they always are. But with the way Florida State and Miami played, with the way how physical they were, it's time for other teams to start looking out because these teams can be really good. And you get an older quarterback, Carson Beck. And yes, last year they got Cam Ward. But Carson Beck is a champion. Carson Beck came from Georgia. This is different. Carson Beck looked so poised last night that it was scary. Carson sometimes makes bad decisions when he was at Georgia. Yesterday, he made plays. So I'm curious to see what some of these teams will do and how some of these teams will step up to the plate next week. And we see teams like Michigan and Bryce Underwood playing tough. I want to see some of these teams where they go face different teams of different calibers now that you didn't have all summer to prepare for. Florida State has all summer to prepare for Alabama. Now it's going to be different. Miami had all summer to prepare for Notre Dame. Now it's going to be different. As we get to the middle of the season, you start seeing teams that get film on you and they can stop your offense. One of the bigger things for Florida State was you go out and get an offensive coordinator in Gus Malzahn. Gus, who's won a national championship, who's played with great running quarterbacks, who also turned UCF's offense prolific. Gus has always been this type of offensive coordinator who causes confusion. So I'm interested to see what that team can do. And I'm interested to see across the country, like a team even like Oregon. Oregon is going to fly under the radar, but I think Oregon can be one of the more dangerous teams because Oregon is always going to be around. So this is just week one, but we're going to find out who is going to actually be elite going on to week two and then just entering throughout the season. We're going to find out who's really going to be those teams that we have to look at and who's going to be teams that 2 losses, 3 losses is going to get them out of the door. So we're looking to see who's going to win, who's going to do the things that it takes, and who's going to continue to be physical outside of just week one and the preparation you had all spring and summer. It's time to find out who those real teams are.